Welcome back to Medal School. This week we're looking at the CEO of Bentley, Adrian Hallmark. Now, over the rest of this, we're going to look at his journey to becoming CEO of Bentley. We're going to look at the problems that Bentley faced in 2018. We're going to look at Adrian's leadership style, and we're also going to see what we ate on the night with Adrian at the industry dinner. But first of all, to Adrian's journey. Adrian's journey, I think, is something we can all relate to. When he finished school, he knew he had an interest of cars, but was much more interested into motorbikes because they were cool. And also what we found out is that essentially he did study engineering, but didn't have a huge passion for it, but did actually get to the stage where he made a shock absorber for a nuclear power station. But as a sort of part-time job, he sold cars at the local BMW dealership. I think what I liked about this was that also the likes of Bernie Ecclestone have come to the top of this world by starting in car dealerships. And what was interesting about this specific BMW car dealership was the owners bought the now bankrupt at the time F1 team March's old stock. Now, what they did with the March's old stock was Adrian was asked as a sort of enthusiastic young salesman to brand it up, resell it to other people, and also keep some of the best parts so the owners of the car dealership could go racing. This gave Adrian a sort of first interest into cars after very much being a bike person, and gradually his part-time job at BMW became full-time. Quite shortly later, into his mid-20s, Adrian ended up as a regional area sales manager at Porsche. I think what I find incredible about Adrian's story is then in less than a decade, he ended up as managing director of Porsche Great Britain. And I think when you meet him, and we'll go into it a bit more in terms of his leadership style, is that ultimately he's a very down-to-earth guy who's very charming and actually comes across as someone, if you were to buy a car, you'd want to buy a car from him or his team because essentially they are giving you what you want as a customer. I think what was interesting is then he has a career that goes throughout the VW group after this point. He has a little bit of a 7-year hiatus through to Jaguar, but before then he actually came director of marketing at Bentley for a period of time just before 2005, leaves to go to JLR and then comes back. And he comes back as Chief Executive Officer of Bentley Motors in 2018. So now we go on to the next part. What was happening in Bentley or throughout that time? Well, the reality of what was happening through Bentley in 2018 is they'd lost a lot of money. It was the first time they'd lost such a large amount of money. And one of the biggest problems was that the cars were not being finished in one go. So the Bentley Continental was taking over 130 hours to build. To put that into context, a Golf takes 17 hours to build. But the majority of that time was actually fixing problems. Adrian talked about a story how when he first started at Bentley, they looked at a Bentley and things that the workmen weren't happy with raised in over 900 faults. But what Adrian said is that gave a huge opportunity to fix things and make things better. And that actually then resulted in a process that by 2019, the Continental didn't take 130 hours to build, but 85 hours, and with very little correction. He said at the worst point, there was nearly 50% of the production line being corrected for errors, and therefore it was really slowing down manufacture. And then what's happened at Bentley since? Well, you can see on the film now there's this beautiful Bentayga. This Bentayga has actually brought Bentley to a new audience, the SUV audience, of a family that wants to cross Europe, that still wants to have the ability to go over 180 miles an hour, but an absolute luxury. But the main success story is in 2021, Bentley's had its most successful year in history. So that's probably the medal of medal school in that Adrian has led Bentley to the very pinnacle of its status and its best ever performance. And what that means is they've sold over 14,000 cars this year. And also what it means is that the profitability has gone up with fewer and fewer errors. But Bentley faces major challenges like other car manufacturers. And one of the major challenges they face is that essentially with environmental taxation in the Netherlands, a cost of a Bentley goes from say 160,000 to over 300,000. So Bentley knew they had to change their emissions to make sure that they're fit for the environment and fit for their customer base. And what they've done is that actually in the next couple of years, all of Bentleys will go to hybrid, and then by 2030, it's going to go to electric. But when we then now come on to leadership styles of Adrian, it's very interesting about how he breaks down his business focus. He broke his business focus down the following. They looked at how many people in the world are wealthy enough to potentially be a Bentley owner. Now in 2018, that statistic was there was about 6 million people across the globe that had over $6 million outside of property as liquid cash, and potentially were the type of clientele that really should be driving a Bentley. What's incredible is actually the global growth between 2018 and 2021 means there's now 18 million people in this world that have that similar status, not just 6 million. What also there I think is incredible about Adrian's cars is the range of audience they applied to. On one hand, you've got the Queen, who's a loyal Bentley driver and owner. And on the other hand, you have Cristiano Ronaldo, who famously Bentley ran out of fuel during the recent fuel supply crisis in Britain. So there's a broad range. But what's incredible is not only looking at that leadership style, the numbers, but Adrian's passionate about keeping the workforce in crew. He talks about how once someone comes to crew, they very, very rarely leave. And also there's not loads of other competition of other motor manufacturers, which he said they faced in some of the other parts of the VW group, where they build in massive motor hubs. I think also is that idea of getting great craftsmanship. You can have any leather, any type of wood in your Bentley. And I was very fortunate enough to go to the factory and see one of their woodworkers actually done a Battle of Britain scene in the dashboard. The other thing I noticed about Adrian's leadership style, very open to talk to the press. The dinner itself was actually chaired by Autocar, and also what we saw was that there was quite a few journalists there on the night, happy to give them quotes, happy to talk, and happy to face the questions. The final part I got about his leadership style is a guy who likes to drive. He had some really nice stories about driving his Taycan down to Lyon in France when he's looked at other cars in the VW group, as well as Bentley, and also this passion of actually what does it mean and what does Bentley stand for. And then, we can see on the footage of this Bentley, this WO Bentley from their collection. I mean, this car is absolutely stunning. It's got years of heritage, but it's about the future now. And Adrian wants to build an EV platform, not just that every car is EV by 2030, but that we solve this problem of electric supply points across Europe. He said one of the problems that stops a Bentley owner having electric at the moment, it's not the technology, but it's the fact there could be broken charge points, there could be frustrations on that, and you don't want that stress and anxiety when actually a typical Bentley owner may well have all the stresses of running a major business. Now coming on to the food, it was a delightful evening. We started with a bit of game, which I thought was great fun, a game terrain, because you can imagine having just been in your Bentayga up in the Highlands in Scotland, shooting some clays. Then the main course was a lovely fish halibut, and I could imagine myself driving across many beautiful coastlines in the Bentley. And then you'll probably see this picture coming up now. The profiterolles not only were great with the chocolate, but they had a lovely white chocolate Bentley logo. What I've learned from Adrian Hallmark is that actually learning your trade, having a bit of engineering, having a bit of sales, and that passion means that you could also one day be the CEO of Bentley. What I also learned is you can't sit on your laurels just because you've produced fantastic cars in the past. What you need to do is actually produce cars that are still world-class and have world-class technology. Bentley's going on an EV journey. I hope you enjoyed Medal School's insight to one of the leading motor manufacturers' CEOs, and click on the subscribe button for many more leadership journeys. If you are a leader that wants to tell your story, we're always open to do interviews on Medal School. We look forward to having contact, and the email is in the final slide. Thank you for your indulgence, ladies and gentlemen.